This is a filet mignon, which is from a supplier that we use called Snake River Farms. You see some really nice fat into it, but maybe not as marbled as prime. This is, in French, would be called the contrefilet. And the contrefilet would be up against the fillet on the animal like that. This is also known as a sirloin, which we're used to. And this is a piece of prime meat. So you can see a little more marbling in this cut. The sirloin, the fillet. This is a ribeye. So in the animal, you have two areas which connect to one another. The ribs connect to the loin. So in this case, you would have the loin, which is going to be below your ribs, and then the ribeye, which is part of the rib cage, above your ribs. So this is an extension of the loin. And this is the ribeye, and we start to see what I love here, which is called the décolleté, or in French, the calotte. And we have used that at the French Laundry for years now as its own muscle group. This is a choice ribeye. You can see the difference in the marbling. There's hardly any fat in this. And as we all know, fat is flavor. So the more marbling your meat has, the more flavor it's going to have, and therefore certainly the more expensive it's going to be. This is what would be graded by the USDA as choice beef. And you can see there's not as much marbling in it as the prime beef. This is another prime beef from Nebraska, which again, you can see the difference. This is the ribeye with the rib bone on it. So this is what is known in French as a côte de bœuf, which we're going to be pan roasting here shortly. It's a beautiful piece of beef, typically used for 2 people, and it's one of my favorite cuts. You can also see the décolleté here in the same way that you see the décolleté here. Here we have a A5 ribeye from Japan. You can see the way it's marbled. Very, very extreme. You can see up here it's almost as much fat, or maybe even a little more fat, than there is protein in that. I've often wondered about what was the inspiration to produce a cattle that resulted in a ribeye with as much fat. And I surmise that there was a farmer who had a piece of toro belly and saw the amount of fat in the tuna and thought, maybe I can raise a cow, a cattle, to have that same kind of fat content, that same kind of marbling, because it does resemble in many ways toro, that beautiful fatty tuna belly that we all prize so much. Here we have another piece of beef, which is the flat iron. It comes from the shoulder, and it's a beautiful cut. It's a little chewier. We use it at Bouchon for a steak frite. Great flavor, texture. There's a little bit of resistance, but I like that in a steak frite. I like to have my meat something I really have to chew with. And then, of course, we have our Salmon Creek pork chop here, which is a beautiful pork chop produced by a wonderful farm in Salmon Creek area. When we get to some of our birds, this is a duck breast, and you can see how dry that skin is, and that's very important when we're going to pan roast this, because we want that skin to be extra dry to get all that moisture out of there. So the only thing that's left is the fat. And when we cook it slowly in pan roasting, that fat's really going to render out of there and result in an extremely crispy skin. And that's what we so much love about our duck breast. The things that we do quickly in a hot saute pan would be the paillard, Wiener Schnitzel, Dover sole, salmon, things that would cook in a relatively quick period of time. We may pan roast a duck breast or a chicken breast that may take a little longer and a little lower heat to maintain the quality of rendering that we want with the duck breast, or the quality of crispiness we want in our chicken skin. So I've always encouraged, as you've heard me say in the past, is to build relationships with our farmers, our fishermen, our foragers, and our gardeners. That's very important, but also building relationships with those individuals who are selling us our ingredients in grocery stores. So your produce managers and certainly your meat departments, there's always a manager there. So get to know that person. Get to have conversations with him about different qualities of beef, duck, chicken, pork. You'll be able to really understand better what's available for you. And on those special occasions when you really want something extra special, they may be able to get you a beautiful piece of Wagyu. We're looking at our beef here right now, and it's very bright red, as you can see. Most of these haven't been aged for a long period of time. When you see this, you know it's a fairly fresh piece of meat. There's a couple aging techniques, and something that was introduced maybe 20 years ago was called wet aging. They put a piece of beef, maybe a whole filet or a whole sirloin, a whole prime rib, and cryovac it. And then they let that age for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. It doesn't really have any evaporation. To me, aging is about evaporation. And aging requires a lot of time and a lot of patience and a special environment. So if you went into an old butcher shop and or one of those old New York steakhouses where you see that meat in an aging room, and it's really dark, almost dark maroon. Sometimes you start to see a little mold growing on it, which is not really mold, but it's a bacteria that grows on the beef, which is very good. It is actually drying. It's actually dehydrating, which means it's making the flavors that much more intense because of the dehydration process. Aged beef is certainly very expensive. It takes a long time. You'll see on some restaurant menus 60-day dry aged beef, which is important because it's not wet aged, as I explained earlier. Dry aged is really what you want to be. You'll see 90 days, you'll see 120 days. Each one has a really different flavor profile, and yet you have to really be a connoisseur of beef to really get into that 120-day dry aged beef, because it does have a little funky flavors to it, which a lot of people appreciate, me being one of them. I tend to be in that category between 30 and 60 days in the dry aged category, where you start to get some aging, some dehydration, some intensity of flavor because of the moisture loss. But these here have not been aged at all. Our duck breast, as you can see, has been dried for 3 days so that the moisture starts to evaporate. And this can give you a sense of what aging starts to look like in the piece of meat. But aging is something that you'll see in very special butcher shops or very special restaurants. So as a youngster, when my mother would cook a whole prime rib, the decal, this piece here, was always the most favorite. And of course, I was the youngest, so I didn't always have the opportunity to get any of that. As I grew older, as my brothers left home, then the decal was a little more accessible for me. And I realized that was really the most flavorful muscle on the rib roast. As we started to develop our beef program at the French Laundry, I wanted to find something that was really special. As difficult it is to find really great beef, I knew that the decal was going to be something that would be a little unusual and very intense in flavor, and the texture just a wonderful kind of buttery texture. So I worked with Snake River Farm to actually have them remove the decal, the calotte, which is the muscle from the prime rib. Now that was a very difficult thing to do. It took me several years to convince them that they were going to be financially viable by removing what has typically been part of a rib roast. And I convinced them because I told them they could sell the ribeye as a true ribeye, meaning that the ribeye was going to be consistent throughout. If you can imagine an entire prime rib, the decal at the loin end is going to be thinner, and as it goes back, it becomes thicker. So it's a piece of meat about 18 inches long and about 7 inches wide that begins at a very thin end and ends up at a very fat end. You can see here, this is one of the fat ends of the decal. And then the ribeye would become just a beautiful piece of true ribeye. After 2 years, I convinced them to do that, and the decal or the calotte became its own muscle. Today, you'll find it in the USDA Meat Buyer's Guide as an individual muscle where you never saw that before. And you'll see calotte of beef in menus around the country now because of our ability to convince our farmers that this was the way that we could enhance the quality of the experience for our guests at the French Laundry and enhance the quality of the experience of anybody else who was going to have a ribeye around the country.